Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're going to dive into something that is universally fascinating and honestly kind of frustrating for all of us. We're going to pull apart the neuroscience and the psychology behind a deeply relatable mystery. Why we start our goals with this massive, unstoppable surge of energy, but rarely ever finish them. If you've ever set a really bold new intention, bought all the gear, only to watch the whole thing just fizzle out a few weeks later, you are going to want to pay very close attention to the cutting edge research we're unpacking today.
Look, we've all felt it. That incredible, electric burst of day one energy. Just picture it for a second. You're opening a brand new notebook, you're writing day one in bold capital letters. Or maybe you're lacing up those fresh gym shoes, smiling confidently in the mirror. You tell yourself, okay, this time I'm serious. This time is absolutely going to be different. But then, well, days pass. That initial fiery energy just kind of fades, and slowly, you just stop. There's no massive dramatic explosion, no big spectacular failure. There's just this quiet, silent fade where those brand new gym shoes end up living in the back of your closet. And that brings us to the ultimate question. Why does this sudden loss of motivation happen? And more importantly, why does it happen to almost everyone, no matter how badly we actually want the result? We beat ourselves up so much over this, right? We assume it's some deep character flaw, or that we just don't have enough willpower, or that we're inherently lazy. But as you'll see in the research we're about to cover, this universal tendency to quit actually has very little to do with your character, and a whole lot more to do with how your brain is biologically hardwired. Section 1. The diagnosis. Inside your brain. Let's dive right into this.
So, the answer to our quitting problem actually starts with a little chemical called dopamine. Now, dopamine gets a lot of press in pop culture as the motivation molecule. We tend to think of it as this magic fuel that gets things done. But here's the major misconception: dopamine is actually not about the achievement of your goal at all. It's almost entirely about the anticipation of a reward. Think about it kind of like online shopping. The thrill is in adding the items to your cart, right? Tracking the package. But that feeling often just vanishes the moment you actually open the box. It's about the craving, not the having. And this is backed up by some brilliant research from neuroscientists like Dr. Wolfram Schultz. He found that dopamine spikes before the reward, not after. So what does this actually mean for you? Well, it means your brain gets way more excited imagining the success, visualizing that incredible transformation, than it does doing the actual gritty work. Your brain is essentially flooded with chemical motivation when you start, purely based on the fantasy of the end result. But then we hit the wall. When we start out on day one, our expectation is this perfect, uninterrupted journey. We imagine quick results, beautifully smooth progress, constant motivation. But reality hits hard, because reality looks like sweating, failing, dealing with sheer frustration, and agonizingly slow, zigzagging progress. Once that harsh reality kicks in and the physical or mental work feels, well, way harder than expected, your dopamine levels just absolutely plummet. And the impact of this dopamine drop is honestly staggering. To put this into perspective, an American Psychological Association study found that over 80% of New Year's resolutions fail by the second week of February. 80%. And the reason why is really profound. People don't actually quit their goals. They quit the gap between their expectation and reality. When the effort feels exponentially harder than expected, motivation just collapses under the heavy weight of that reality. All right, section 2, the complication: mental energy and delay. So to understand why it's so incredibly hard to follow through, we have to talk about decision fatigue. Psychologist Roy Baumeister extensively studied this concept, and it's a real game changer. Every single day, your brain makes thousands upon thousands of tiny decisions. What clothes to wear, what route to take in traffic, how to politely respond to that annoying email. Each one of those micro decisions literally chips away at your mental battery. So by the time 6 p.m. rolls around and you're finally supposed to work on your new goal, your mental energy is completely tapped out.
Look, I really want you to take this to heart. Choosing comfort or distraction over your goal at the end of a long day is not because you are fundamentally lazy. Your brain is a biological machine, and its primary job is survival. When your mental battery is empty from all that decision fatigue, your brain instinctively chooses the easiest option, resting, scrolling on your phone, because it is actively trying to conserve calories and energy. It is just an evolutionary survival mechanism trying to keep you safe from exhaustion. And compounding this lack of energy is the timeline of our rewards. According to findings from Stanford University,
Human beings deeply, fundamentally struggle with delayed gratification. Our brains just love instant rewards. Social media, junk food, quick entertainment, they give us that dopamine hit right now with zero effort. But meaningful goals, getting fit, writing a book, building a business, they aggressively delay the reward. You have to put in months of effort up front. So your brain will almost always default to what feels good immediately over something that might pay off a year from now. Moving right along to section 3, identity and environment. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what author James Clear emphasizes. He says that lasting change happens when you shift your identity, not just your goals, because the internal story you tell yourself dictates everything. If you secretly see yourself as someone who, always quits, your actions are eventually going to align with that belief. If your internal monologue says, "I'm just not a disciplined person," your brain will actually work overtime to prove you right. Behavior always follows identity. And because our new identity is so fragile when we're just starting out, we easily fall into what's called the all or nothing trap. People will start out perfectly, right? They eat clean for 4 days or read 10 pages a day. Then life happens. They get busy, they miss a single day. Suddenly they throw their hands up and say, "Well, it's over, I ruined the whole streak." They view one tiny mistake as a total failure and just quit entirely. But the research is clear here. Missing one day doesn't break your progress. Completely quitting does. The problem isn't the failure itself, it's our catastrophic reaction to it. The final piece of this sabotage puzzle is our surroundings. We have this romanticized ideal vision that we're going to rise to our goals through sheer, unadulterated willpower. But the grounded reality is so different. Studies continually show that your physical surroundings and your social circles shape your behavior way more than your internal motivation ever could. If you're surrounded by visual distractions on your desk or junk food in the pantry, willpower alone won't save you. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your environment. Which brings us to our final paradigm shift, section 4, the cure, systems over motivation. The absolute best antidote to this motivation problem was famously studied by psychologist Angela Duckworth. She identified this absolutely critical trait called grit. Grit is the ability to keep going consistently, even when you do not feel motivated, inspired, or excited in the slightest. Her research proves that long-term success isn't driven by the most naturally talented people or the folks who are the most hyped up on day one. It's driven by grit. Emotional, temporary motivation will always lose to quiet, persistent grit. So how do we actually cultivate this grit? Well, the source material gives us some highly actionable fixes. First, make the task smaller than your motivation. If you don't want to run 3 miles, literally just commit to putting on your shoes and walking to the mailbox. Second, focus on building reliable daily systems instead of obsessing over a massive final outcome. Third, reduce friction to make starting incredibly easy. Lay your workout clothes out the night before. Fourth, completely accept that low motivation days are normal. Don't fight them. And finally, build that new identity. Tell yourself daily, "I am someone who shows up no matter what." So the crucial point boils down to this really simple 3-step formula. 1. Stop waiting for motivation to strike. It is a terrible strategy to wait until you feel like it. 2. Act and start small without that motivation, because action actually creates motivation, not the other way around. And 3. Show up consistently. This is vital. Showing up at just 10% capacity on a really bad day keeps the habit alive, and that is vastly more powerful than showing up at 100% capacity once a month. Intensity always loses to consistency. If you take absolutely anything away from this explainer today, let it be this deeply reassuring fact. You do not lose motivation because you are weak or flawed. You lose it because your brain is biologically wired to crave instant rewards and to conserve energy. But once you understand that, you can hack the whole system. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel inspired. When you stumble, you just need to start again. Let go of the guilt, drop the perfectionism, and just try again. I'll leave you with this final, powerful thought to reflect on as we wrap up today. Motivation gets you started, but discipline is what changes your life. So are you going to keep chasing that fleeting dopamine rush of day 1, or are you ready to build the quiet, unstoppable systems of day 100? The choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep learning,